Hey guys, Chris here with Palmer Aquatics. Today's video is on sponge filters. When and how do you know when you're supposed to clean them? I like to categorize sponge filters into two different types. You have your high flow and you have your polishing. The one on the left here is the polishing sponge pad. It's a lot finer of a foam pad, and the one on the right here is the Aquarium Co-op high flow. I'm a huge fan of the high flows just because they don't get clogged as often, and it's a huge variable when talking about when and how often you have to clean out the pad. Let's take a quick look at some of the sponge filters in some of my tanks. This is a hydro high flow sponge filter. For the most part, I've switched over all of my sponge filters to these sponge filters here. This is a pretty messy tank because these are South Americans and they like to nitpick at the floating plants. The sponge filter in the back here, on the other hand, is a high density sponge filter, and it's not working so great, as you can see. And to be honest with you, I have no idea what's wrong with it because it's a high density sponge and you just can't tell if it's clogged or not. Whereas the high flows, ooh guys, there's my new Oscar fish. Ooh, rare sighting. I haven't even done a video on him yet. Okay, now that I've talked about the variables of sponge filters, let's answer the question here. How do we know when we should take our sponge filter out and clean it? Because some people say they never clean it, and some people say they give it a squeeze every 2 days. What's the answer? What I do is I gauge the sponge filters differently. This is a polishing sponge filter, and this is a high flow. The one on the right is obviously not going to clog as often as the one on the left. Hence, this is why these are my favorite, and you have to wonder to yourself why Corey from Aquarium Co-op made this his main sponge filter to go with. These are still a great sponge filter to use, but they're just not, you have to take them out more often, you have to squeeze them more often, but anyways, what I do is take a look at the cosmetic appearance of the outside surface. When this thing is completely covered in gunk, that's when I change it. It's literally that simple. These are a little harder because what you have to do is look at the inside pores of the sponge. And this one is a pretty brand new one, so you won't tell. So what we'll do is we'll jump on a different tank here and we'll take a look at some super dirty ones. So here is my wall of tanks. It's 2 40-gallon breeders and 4 75-gallon tanks. Let's go up to the left-hand corner with my flower horn and Midas. You can tell that these sponge filters are alive, clear, and ready to do havoc. Well, I guess I don't know what that means, but they're doing really well. You can tell these have been freshly cleaned. The flower horn, if you follow the channel, he got into a fight a couple days ago. He is healing up perfectly. There is a video to come on that. All right, let's take a look at a dirtier tank. This tank is in midst of a changing/overhaul. I have been cleaning out floating plants and it's just a complete mess. I'm about to do a gravel vac, but I wanted to show you what a clogged sponge filter looks like. And yes, this is a high flow sponge filter. I also have to warn you that just because less amount of air bubbles is coming out of the unit, that doesn't necessarily mean it's clogged. It just means maybe there's a problem going on with the airline or the air stone, but it is sometimes a telltale sign that yes, the sponge is clogged. There's just so many moving parts when it comes to sponge filters because there's different types of foams in sponge filters, there's different housing units, there's different air stones. You can use clogless air stones. I don't even use air stones anymore. There's some people use check valves. I don't use check valves. There's just so many moving parts, but the telltale sign is pretty much if you have a lossage of air bubbles coming out of your sponge filter, that there's a chance it could be clogged. This sponge filter right here, there is very little amount of air bubbles coming out, and you would think that maybe the sponge is clogged, but I know that I cleaned that sponge filter like 4 days ago, so there's just some weird issue with the airline. And you would think it would be nearly impossible for debris to get inside of the air line, but it happens somehow. You would think that the air pump doesn't allow things to get inside there, but somehow I always seem to get something clogged inside the air stone or the airline itself. Guys, when you start using a lot of sponge filters, you almost become like a scientist of rebuilding them and working on them. If you have a decent amount of fish tanks running with sponge filters, you will learn that maintaining them is a huge time void. Here's me running a sharp pin through the end of the airline. Something got clogged on the inside, and I just cleaned the sponge filter a couple days ago, so it does get pretty annoying. Whereas if you would hang on the back filter, You could walk up, grab the sponge pad, rinse it out, and not even have to get inside the tank. That is one setback with sponge filters.